Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of my podcast, the Fresh Start Life Coaching Podcast. And today I have another special guest. Her name is Joy Acaso, and I'm excited for this conversation. She is an anxiety support coach. She is a licensed psychotherapist and also just someone that has gone through a miscarriage, unfortunately. So she's going to share her story about just her background, her miscarriage, how she was able to conceive after the miscarriage, but then also the anxiety that came up. Because I know a lot of times we just think, okay, after the miscarriage, you get pregnant and then life is perfect. But as you know, those
Mm.
that have gone through it know that things don't always go as planned, or you might just have anxiety or just so many other mix of emotions, during that successful pregnancy. So I will bring on Joy, and thank you so much for being our guest today, Joy. So I'll let you, just tell your story and share your background.
Hi, Danielle. Thank you so much for having me in your podcast. Such a wonderful topic and very important and close to my heart. As you've said, it's something that I've experienced, miscarriage, and something that's never really happened in my family, not with my mom, or even my cousins. I don't know any, I didn't know anyone who's experienced miscarriage in my close circle. So I became a first-time mom 15 years ago with my husband, who we're now married about 16 years. And 15 years ago, you mentioned, anxiety. I actually experienced postpartum anxiety with our daughter. She's now in 10th grade. It's been a blessing to see her grow up. But when she was about 2 years old, we got pregnant with our second baby. And there was a lot of mixed emotions because with our first baby, with our daughter, she wasn't sleeping well. She wasn't eating well. She had, actually, to this day, we didn't know what she was having. She had like an acid reflux of some sort, and it was like really tough on me because for the first 3 months of her life, I was by myself. Well, I had my parents, thankfully, to help me so much, but my husband was still in the Philippines, and I was trying to get him to come here. So we live in Florida, and we had gotten married in the Philippines, and we were waiting for his papers and things like that. And so the first 3 months I was by myself with my daughter. I didn't know. I had no idea about anything about sleep training or lactation consultants or anything like that. And now in my work as an anxiety support coach and licensed psychotherapist, I actually have such a wonderful community of all of those things, like doulas and lactation consultants and um, people who specialize in maternal mental health. So um, I'm very well connected now and not planning to have a baby anymore. So it's just so fascinating to me that, these things happened this way. So when we had our first baby, like I said, we had I had a few concerns, with her and things like that because I just did not know what I was doing. I was already in the mental health field at that time. Um, I was actually facilitating parenting groups, and I was working with the youth, but my work was so focused on the youth and adolescents that I did not know how to care for a baby, or even like the toddler years were such a learning experience for me. I forgot that, they have to be a baby first before they become a teenager. So I enjoyed my work with teens and their parents and things like that. But it was such a journey for me to, as a first time mom. And so that was the experience. And then 2 year at when she um, got to be 2 years old, I got pregnant again. And we were very surprised because, we were still getting used to the whole parenting and things like that. So I had mixed emotions, as I said earlier. But then about 6 weeks into the pregnancy, I received my lab work, and they said that I was low on progesterone. And I did not research on it. I didn't, I think at that time I was still learning to advocate for myself and understand what I needed as a mom and needed as a woman, a wife. So I did not research it, and I just went along with it. They told me that I needed to um, do something about the low progesterone so that I could increase it. And so I said, okay, I'm a rule follower by nature, so I went ahead and followed my doctor's advice, and they told me to take it easy. And now looking back, I remember that I had just transitioned into my new role. I was in the medical field and was helping dialysis patients at that time. And I had 100 patients under my care. Um, I just now realizing that that was a stressful time for me. So to be advised to take it easy was easier said than done. I was working long hours and plus raising our 2 year old, um, and also struggling with the fact that um, being a working mom, like how do I balance that? Wanting to be there for my family, wanting more quality time with them, and then having to also, uh, work the best that I could in my career. And so 6 weeks into the pregnancy, I just, started um, bleeding, and I needed to see my doctor. And I went into the emergency room, and that's how we found out that we had lost our baby. And, I was so shocked. Um, like I said earlier, I'd never known anyone in my circle who had lost a baby before, and I didn't know, what to do with myself. Everyone around me was getting, after that, then everyone around me seemed like they were having babies. Everybody was getting pregnant and happy, and, you know, um, really looking forward to growing their family. And then meanwhile, there I was thinking to myself, what did I do wrong to lose the baby? So, but at that time, my husband had already come to the States, and thank God, because he's always been so supportive, and he was, there for me to comfort me and things like that. But I think that now, now I know that I believe that you just don't ever really understand the full extent of it until you go through it. And we can be there, absolutely, and support one another. But I think things like this, where we are able to share our stories, and, your audience and your listeners coming to listen to these episodes, I think even for me, these things are very helpful, just sharing my stories and also listening to other people's stories can be part of the healing process. So I'm just happy to be able to share that story with your audience as well.
Thank you so, so much, Joy, for sharing. And I am so, so sorry for your loss. And I know it's just even, it wasn't, though it wasn't like a recent loss, it's still something that stays with you. And I know
Right.
many women I've spoken to, as they retell their story, whether it was 5 months ago, 5 days ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago, or more, it's still just reliving it. So I appreciate your honesty and your vulnerability. And as you were talking, it made me think about how a lot of times with medical professionals, they just say, oh, just get rest, and then they don't
Yeah.
really guide you with what that looks like. Like as you say that you had a 2 year old, you had a job, is very demanding. And so they'll just kind of like write you this prescription literally or give you a handout about rest or say, oh, get bed rest or stay off your feet. But you're like, as you stated, taking care of a child, you had a lot of responsibility at work. I'm sure you still had things at home, family responsibilities. And I'm like, I wish that they were more just understanding of that and versus just, oh, get rest and, hand you a paper and send you on your way, and trying to maybe help you find ways to talk to you about it a little bit more, say, okay, this is the importance of doing this, or really telling you about, low progesterone. I've talked to other women where, have had multiple miscarriages due to having low progesterone, and their doctors
Mhm.
weren't really willing to work. They just said, oh, your progesterone's low. And then that was all, and not really telling about the seriousness of it, of the situation, which caused multiple miscarriages for them. So,
Wow,
I
that's so true.
yeah,
Yes.
just
Yes.
appreciate you for just bringing that up and mentioning that. And then also to another point that you brought up, you mentioned, you said, what's wrong with me? What did I do wrong? And so I
Mm-hmm.
feel like many women feel like that. It's like this whole thing of like with a miscarriage, it's like you feel like in life there has to be someone to blame. And you're like, okay, I
Yes.
can't blame the doctors, even though, everyone kind of has a role in it in a way. So you blame yourself. And so you turn that
Yes.
inwards, and it's just like, kind of what do you do, with those emotions and those feelings, and you just think, well, my friends were able to get pregnant and they were able to sustain their pregnancy, so you blame yourself. If I'd only done this, if I'd only stayed off my feet, if I only taken this sooner, or all these things. But in that, it's like we can't put that blame on ourselves. It's easy to do, but it's something that we shouldn't do. So just the next part of
Absolutely.
your story, oh, sorry, I don't want to cut you off at all. If you don't mind sharing the next part, is you did go on to have another child, some years later. So if you can share that next part of, going to a fertility specialist because you were having trouble conceiving, is this kind of like the
Yes.
next part of your story? We'd love to hear more.
Thank you. Yeah, so I saw my friends getting married, I'm getting pregnant and adding more in their family, and it really did make me feel very sad and almost to the point where I felt shame because, I couldn't get pregnant. Of course, now it's like now, I look back and I'm like, oh, I wonder, where that came from. I wonder why, I felt that way. Um, and so the energy of just um, mourning and grieving that part of me turned into slowly, of course, into just allowing myself to love on our daughter. It didn't happen, overnight for sure, but just slowly looking at her and steadily just allowing myself to understand, what was going on in my body and like I said, grieving what happened. Then I looked at my daughter and I said, okay, she's here and she needs me. And I want to be there for her. Um, and so I started pouring into her. But like you said, Danielle, it doesn't matter how many years have gone by, you kind of still have that in the back of your mind, and we still desire to have another baby. um we wanted to get pregnant again, but we couldn't. And so that the anxiety came back to me, and I started to then now research, how do you know when you're ovulating, or what's the right time to, you know, be able to just be intimate with my husband? Is there such thing? And then my primary doctor at that time happened to be also an endocrinologist, and she was amazing, so encouraging. I hope that women find, um, providers that can be on their side, providers that, like you said, will explain, to them what's happening, what they can do practically, and how, and all the specifics of, what they're going through. And an encouragement, a source of encouragement for them too, because my endocrinologist was just amazing. I felt encouraged by her. She said, don't worry too much about it. You need to. So we talked about stress. We talked about taking care of my body and stress, and um, things like that. And then she also, gave me the number for a fertility specialist. And so my husband and I talked about it. We even looked into, maybe God was calling us to adopt, because it had been like maybe 3 years, and we weren't conceiving, and there was nothing happening or anything like that. And so we just explored the options. And when I was about to make an appointment with a fertility doctor, lo and behold, I remember it was, I think, January when I found out. I was on my way to work, and I remember that I had been late with my cycle, so I decided to um, get a pregnancy test, and I tested myself at my work, and and I found out that I was positive, and I called my husband crying, and we were so overjoyed that this was finally happening again. But in between those um those years, I tried to not stress about it, but again, I know that I was um looking at my calendar. I was trying to figure out, what was the best day, what's going on. I even bought kits and things like that, just to be sure, and just that taking hold of uncertainty, and trying to control the variables, the situations, and our circumstance, um, because there were so many things that was going on, with my mind too. I was thinking that, okay, I'm getting older. Oh, my daughter was getting older, the risk of getting pregnant later in life, and all of those things that I was thinking about, that I was trying to again control. And and so it was a journey to that point. And then when we had our rainbow baby, which was our son, he's now 10. um they had questions about my miscarriage. So now I had to answer, because we did share with them later on, much later on. And so we've had conversations about that. And they call our, second baby, baby A, which is a for our last name. And once in a while we'll still talk about it to this day. And while there is still sadness in me, there's there I think the shame has healed and the guilt has healed. Um, and one thing that, I try to share is that grief is very difficult, right? Like, even though grief is not an emotion in itself, it brings up a lot of emotions. And so many times it doesn't even focus on that thing that you're grieving, which is, for me, for example, it was a miscarriage. Um, it brought up a lot of disappointments and regrets in my life that I'm like, okay, we're not really trying to bring those back, but but they do sometimes, and they come in waves. Sometimes they were big waves, sometimes they were small waves. But one thing that I found helpful, for me, and I try to share also with women that I work with, is try to connect with the sadness that's, underneath all of the regrets and the disappointments, because that's where it starts to heal. Any hurt, any pain that you feel. And sometimes it is difficult to do that, by yourself. So knowing your options too, if you need to see a therapist or see a coach, or if you have a community of safe people around you, accountability mentors, and things like that, I hope that you can connect with them. Um, just someone who will allow you to share, your story and talk about it without feeling like they have to quote unquote fix you or make things better for you, because um, when you feel safe to talk about your sadness and your pain, then that can also absolutely help you heal in the process, because shame and guilt, as we know, especially with women, no matter what we're going through, it feels like, those things like just always come up, because we have these burden that we take on, and it gets heavy a lot of the times. And so I hope that, women who are listening now, that you are able to have that community. But if you don't, just know that there are resources and there are options for you out there, which again, I did not know when I was going through all of this. Even now, when I'm in mom groups, and we're still trying to wrap our heads around these resources that we didn't know about, and just kind of compiling all of them and trying to figure out how to share it, with women. And so I'm always grateful for, things like this, like your podcast, Danielle. I know that it's reaching the masses, and this is, a great way to share resources and to be able to let women know that they're not alone. Um, the shame and the guilt also were amplified. Like for me, um, because I just heard, other women, there were comments, you and I were talking about this before. Like, I heard comments, things like, "Oh, you should try to have kids, back to back." Because now my kids, my daughter and my son, they're 6 years apart. And sometimes, I'll still hear people say, "Oh, wow, like, that's such a big age gap." Back then, it was such a fresh wound for me that, there was like, I would react to people's comments. I'm okay now, and I think, like I said, because I connected with my sadness and pain, I was able to heal slowly but surely. And whenever people would say, "Oh, there's such a big gap," back then I would be like, "Well, like, I mean, do people even know like my story?" Um, it felt insensitive, for me. And some of them were also just family members who will casually talk about, oh, it's good to have them back to back, so they'll be close with each other, and things like that, and that you won't have to have such a hard time because it feels like you're starting over and things like that. But now I also understand that, while it may sound insensitive, I think people like us as just a society, we just really don't talk about it enough. Like just the experience of women having miscarriage or like infertility and things like that. Having gone through it myself, I also realized how naive I was. Putting it nicely, right? But sometimes I also thought to myself, why I was so ignorant. Like I didn't know, first of all, that it's so common to have, like with women having miscarriages and infertility. I didn't know how common, it was. But again, I feel like we don't talk about it enough. And so um, people have no idea. And so, the insensitivity that I thought was coming, I was able to make sense of it, just, saying like, okay, maybe we need to talk more about it and educate people about it. But it was such a humbling experience for me, and such a reminder that, we really don't know people's stories, and we don't know the background that they're coming from. We don't know the full picture of everything that goes on, with women, with people. And so it's gotten me personally, um be more careful about how I say things, or also open to listening to other people, and the beautiful things that they can share about their lives. And then professionally in my work, with people, um, I've always loved hearing people's stories, and I know in my work, I always tell people I don't use cookie cutter methods, because there's no such thing, right? Like I love the uniqueness of everyone's background and history, but even more so after experiencing that, I realized that we carry, wounds in our hearts that are waiting to be shared in our stories. And so that's just given me more interest, or just allowing even people that I work with to have that space to share, and just talk about, their lives and their experiences, um, because it's so important in the healing space to, find that, um, in our lives. And so yeah, it's been a humbling experience for me. Our kids are now 15 and 10. Sometimes they're close, sometimes they, have conflict and things like that. But for us, the experience is that when our daughter was 6 years old, we had our son, and she was able to just help us also. And having them in these ages, just so to encourage women who are listening, and if you're thinking that, oh, I'm gonna have to start over, or there's such a there's such a big age gap with our children, um, that's just small details, right? Like those things can be worked out, and you can absolutely lay foundations for your family the way that you want to. It doesn't have to be, the standards that society have put out. You can make your family flourish in the way that absolutely makes sense to you.
Thank you so, so much for bringing that up about just that spacing. And I, it was just me. I'm like, I've heard other people say it, and it happened to me with my family. But just thank you for bringing that up because I think a lot of times women will feel guilty and say, okay,
Mm.
with your daughter being 6 and then having another child, and everyone keeps telling you it was better to have them back to back. I had my uncle actually tell me that when I had my daughter, and he's like, yeah, it's better
Mm.
to just have them be done with it and have them close in age. And he has 5
Yes.
kids and they're close in age somewhat. And I'm like, that's great if that works or if that
Yeah.
happens. But then it's just
Yes.
like we put this added pressure on ourselves, to just try and have kids quickly. And then when it's not happening, then it's that additional pressure. But I think too, you also speak to a good point when you had mentioned, reaching out to people for help and reaching out to people that understand. And as much as we love
Yes.
to reach out to family, a lot of times family is kind of the cause of that extra stress and that cause of that extra
Absolutely.
tension and they're
Yes.
like, they're the reason why I need to attend counseling.
Yes.
And
Thank you for
and
bringing that up.
yes, it's so true. I'm like they're making me lose a little bit mentally, but in
Yeah.
that, for those that just kind of feel like I can only some it's cultural. I get it too. So feeling like I can only
Yes.
talk to family, we can't tell our business, but in that it
Yeah.
can be so life-giving, as you stated, to join moms groups, mom groups and support groups. Meet with the counselor that's not a friend or family member or a coworker that's attached to the situation, someone that
Yes.
can provide just unbiased information and support and someone that can just listen to you. Sometimes with family, they try and tell you their story. Oh, I struggled with this. Your cousin struggled with this, or I had this, or they
Mm.
got over this. I was in a group recently of the women's breakfast. And so they were talking about, how their daughter-in-laws and other people would struggle with infertility and different things.
Oh.
And so it was heartwarming to hear it, but then at the same time, it was their family members speaking about it. So they're like, yeah, we just kind of given up on them. And then after, 11 years of trying, they had a child. And so, it's kind of like you get that different point of view. And I'm like, okay, I'm sure the family member felt completely different, as they were trying to conceive for 11 years. And, the family member's like, yeah,
Oh,
we given up on them having
yeah.
kids. And I'm just like, oh, hopefully you didn't tell them that. So,
Yeah.
I'm just like, it was just interesting to see it from family's perspective. And I'm like, okay, that's not really encouraging to me, but different people see it differently. So in the midst of
Yes.
all of this, you provided so many encouraging words, which I appreciate. What would be some tips regarding anxiety that you can provide to the listener for those that are trying to conceive again, or those that have found out they're
Mm.
pregnant and they're excited, but then they feel that anxiety during the pregnancy? What if things don't go right again? Or what if I have a loss? Or how am I going to talk to my young children about, being pregnant again? They just have anxiety overall.
Oh,
So how would you
yeah.
able to, really address that anxiety and manage it?
Wow, those are such good questions. Speaking of which, I actually did experience that as well. So when we got pregnant with our son, I called. I didn't even wait for my doctor to call me. I called them and I asked them specifically about my progesterone. Still didn't know, I mean, I Googled it a little bit at that point, but I just asked them, how's my progesterone? Am I okay? What's going on. And I just want to say for women who are experiencing that kind of anxiety, like, is this going to be okay? Um, I want to validate and acknowledge how you're feeling. It is normal. There is nothing wrong with you. One thing that I like to say is this is biology, right? Like, which means that because you've experienced it in the past, your mind and your body are trying to just protect you. They're trying to protect you from the uncertainty. Just let the emotions come up, and in the anxiety, acknowledge it. Say, okay, here's anxiety. It is important to also recognize that it is a feeling, right? Like it is not who you are. It does not define you. Um, I would discourage you from telling yourself that I'm anxious. Specifically, tell yourself, like, okay, I am feeling anxious, or here is anxiety again, so that you do not fuse, what we call fuse, or become one with the emotion, because you want to be able to um, just feel it, but also understand that, again, it does not diminish your worth or diminish your dignity, which is um, common, for us. That's what we do with our emotions. Um, and so acknowledge and validate it. One thing that we use as a real technique is to worry, what we call worry on purpose, right? Like if you want to set a time later on in the day. Let's say you have multiple children, right, and you have to attend to them, and you start to feel anxious for many reasons. um, if you we because you don't want to ignore it or minimize it. So what you can do, after acknowledging that you are feeling anxious, you can set a time later in the day, let's say when the other kids are napping, or if you're a working mom, outside of the home, you are not in the meeting, right, like your work is over. um, you can set a time later in the day at 5 p.m. I'm going to worry on purpose. And you set your timer for, let's say, 3 minutes. 3 minutes is, pretty long time. You can pick whatever number, is comfortable for you. If this is your first time doing this, it's going to be trial and error, in the beginning, to see what number works for you. So let's say you put the timer for 3 minutes, and you just let your thoughts and your emotions come to the surface without, this is important, without analyzing, without judging yourself, right? Like you're not trying to figure out the why. The first thing that we're doing is to let it just come to the surface. After, you can even write down, what you're worried about. There is also a technique that we call scribble scrabble, to where if you're not planning to go back and reread, your list of worries, you can just simply scribble. It doesn't have to be legible if you don't want to. And whatever thoughts come to mind, you just, because sometimes when we are anxious, when we feel anxious, right, like our hands can get shaky or sweaty, so it's sometimes it's impossible to write legibly. And I can tell you that that's okay. So you just, write down, you scribble things, um because you're also releasing and allowing yourself to release that energy of anxiety, right? So you just scrabble for the 3 minutes. um and after the 3 minutes is over, then you go on about your way. Because the first thing that needs to really happen, because we know about the energy of anxiety, is just for it to move through your thoughts and your emotions and the sensations, that you're feeling, right? So you are actually setting aside time to worry on purpose, so that your emotions know that you're not ignoring it or minimizing it, because it will escalate if you try to push it aside and quote unquote not do anything right about it. So at least you're doing something about it when you are, writing things down, whether legibly or illegibly. So that's one. And the other thing is, what I had mentioned earlier, is to advocate for yourself. There are so many resources now. I mentioned like doulas. Um, I don't even know the full scope of, I know a little bit of what they do, but I feel like having a doula on your side, Danielle, like what you were saying earlier, sometimes it gets complicated when it comes to, reaching out to family or having them help you. So an outside resource could be like a doula, where they're able to help you. There are some doulas who will help you in the house as well, like anything you need, that's connected to the pregnancy, but also keeping, your household, and things like that, depending on what you need and the scope of their work. Um, I think that's such a blessing to have someone, they can come to your home if you need them to, and things like that. Um, and then also, yes, making sure that you advocate for yourself as far as with your healthcare providers, right? Like if you feel something is off, and they're saying like, oh, you're fine, it's hormones, it's whatever. But if that persists with you, ask them for resources, or if they can't provide it, to you, there are websites such as the National Institute of Mental Health that can have they have directories. They have, if you have the city where you live in, sometimes they also have social services that will point you to um, maternal mental health resources and things like that. Very important. And it is, I want to say it's become more accessible. We still have a lot of work, to do, but it's more accessible now as far as resources that you need, and things like that. So if you are experiencing anxiety, just remember that that is such a normal and valid reaction. There's nothing wrong with you. And I hope that you don't, carry the shame or the stigma with it. And just, reach out to people, like Danielle said, that can help you and can support you. Um, Even if they don't understand you 100%, but you know which people can listen to you and won't judge you for the emotions or thoughts that you are having.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm like, I feel encouraged. I needed that
Mm,
reminder. So just thank you, Joy, for just all of your words of just wisdom,
mhm.
encouragement, just how you broke it down. I appreciate how you made everything so easy to understand. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. Because I think a lot of times people feel so overwhelmed. And it's one thing like when you're going through a loss and then you're overwhelmed by life and you're just like, I don't want to have to go on Google and look for the answers, or where do I
Mm,
start? Or, who's
yes.
going to listen to me? And as you stated, you mentioned so many good people, where people, just a good starting point, you said either with a doula, with the counselor, with, support groups. So it's like people can say, oh, I can do that. I thought it was harder than that, So I appreciate you for speaking to that. Now, if someone wants to work with you, how can people reach you? Do you have like a Facebook page or a website? How can people find you if they want to connect with you further?
Absolutely. I'm on Instagram at Joy Acaso, and my Facebook page is at Joy Acaso Coaching. Feel free to email me as well, hello@joyacaso.com, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Good, good. And just for everyone that might be wondering the spelling of your last name, can you spell your last name for
Oh,
us?
yes. It's Acaso, Acaso.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Joy, once again for just being our guest today. Did you have any kind of closing words of encouragement as we wrap up for the listeners? Just like any last things that you'd like to say for those that are listening, or just maybe feel stuck or struggling with
Yeah.
anxiety, or just wondering what to do next?
Yes, absolutely. Be gentle with yourself. If you are in a journey of healing, healing takes place in the most gentle way. It is not about forcing yourself to be happy or to be positive or to be calm. It's about connecting to what is coming up for you. And just know that you're not alone and you don't have to suffer, alone. And I hope that you are able to find that safe space for yourself and your family. And again, extend grace, be kind to yourself just as you would with others. So thank you so much again, Danielle, for having me.
Thank you so much, Joy, for being our guest today. And for those who are listening, please feel free to reach out to Joy. As I stated, she just has a wealth of wisdom, a wealth of experience, and a lot of great information and that background to help, as a psychotherapist and also as an anxiety support coach. So thank you all for listening today. I do wish you the best. Those who are listening in the midst of this holiday season, I know that,
Mhm.
anxiety is heightened at this time of year. So please feel free to just reach out for help, whether it's me, whether it's Joy, whether it's support groups, whether it's someone that's maybe not a friend, family member, or coworker, but do reach out for help because I know this time of year can be really difficult and very emotional for many people. So thank you for those that have listened today. I wish you the best and talk to you soon. Have a good day. Bye.